It is such an honor to be invited to stand on this stage in this community of such really beautiful people. And today to share this stage with the amazing Reverend Elizabeth Stevens feels so precious to me. I'm happy to be here. One of my teachers, James Hollis, tells the story of Ilse, the daughter of a prominent Christian physician in Lublin, Germany during World War II. Ilse went to the Jewish open market on a sunny Friday in 1944 to buy vegetables for her family's dinner. On Fridays, the market filled with devout Jews buying food before the Sabbath. On this particular Friday, Nazi troops blocked off the streets of the market and herded scores of shoppers onto trains headed for the Majdanek crematorium. Ilse, though Christian, was caught in the roundup and her protesting was ignored. Upon arrival at Majdanek, Jews were sorted into two lines. The one to the right led directly to the ovens, and the one to the left led to a filthy barracks and the promise of long days of hard labor and little food. Ilse watched a young mother with two daughters, ages 4 and 6. The mother was waved towards the barracks, while her young daughters were waved towards the ovens. This mother screamed out in anguish, and she clung to her girls, but she was pushed into her line. Her girls stood motionless, stunned and silent, not understanding why their mother was sobbing. The German officer who had condemned this family came to Ilse next. Again, she asserted her Christian faith, and she named her prominent physician father and grandfather and the name of the hospital that they had built in Lublin. Finally, the German officer believed her and replied, "You are Christian, but you have seen too much to ever go back. Take these two children to the door of the bathhouse, get them inside, and then you will work here. You will not leave." Ilse fell to her knees, relieved that her life had been spared, and then she complied with the officer's instructions. Ilse survived the starvation, the grueling work, the disease, the brutal conditions of Majdanek, and when the camp was liberated, she joined her family in the United States. She didn't marry, and she worked in a library in New York City, where she found a tiny black and white photo in a World War II archive, a photo that had been snapped at the exact moment in 1944 when she had walked those sisters to the ovens. The typed description below the photo read, "An unknown from Lublin leads her two children to the Majdanek crematorium." At the age of 78, 50 years after that picture was taken, Ilse arrived at the psychology office of my teacher with that tiny photo. She had asked for 2 hours of his time, wanting nothing from him except to share her story. Ilse had learned of a Jewish tradition called Melamed Vavnikim. In this tradition, it is believed that no matter how evil or desperate things become on earth, God will always leave 24 humane and just people living. And if you can find just one of them and tell them your story, you can be forgiven. Ilse was telling and retelling her story, hoping she would find the humane and just who would help her lay down her guilt. I've shared this story many times, and each time it kind of breaks my heart a little bit for Ilse, but also a bit for me. I know I'm the same as her. In her shoes, I would have walked the girls to the ovens too, knowing that my resistance would not protect them, and knowing I'd forever remember their tiny faces and the cries of their mother and my role in their tragedy. We haven't all faced a moment like Ilsa, but each of us in this room has faced and will again face the impossibility of certain moral moments. We have felt our own powerlessness, and we've felt the searing emotions of these moments. I start each semester in my child development class with a presentation summarizing our current socio-political climate and describing the ways that our current policy and law impacts children who are growing up in our country. Compared to other industrialized countries, the United States has more children without medical insurance, higher rates of infant death, less access to quality daycare, higher teen pregnancy, more divorce, and actually the list goes on and on. It's actually quite sobering to see all the graphs lined up together. So in class last Thursday after this presentation, I asked my students how they were feeling, what had resonated for them, and how they felt impacted by this presentation. Did they want to know anything more? A young woman at the very back of the room raised her hand and said, "I feel ashamed of my country. We have such capacity to do better than this, and it's painful to see how badly we do." Her shame was a moral response, one that reflects the responsibility she feels for the actions of her government. Ilsa also paid a price, an emotional price, for the actions of her government. She suffered a lifetime of guilt. Shame and guilt are moral emotions, and most commonly we feel them when we ourselves have done something wrong or regrettable. They're a sort of moral navigational system to help us find our way. But like all navigational systems, these emotions are fallible, and they can lead us off track. Too much guilt or too much shame can hem us into narrow and cautious lives and neutralize our dreams. Guilt and shame are close emotional cousins. They look a lot alike, except shame is a bully, and guilt is a pretty decent fellow. Shame exaggerates and blows things out of proportion. Shame is the guy who will tell you that any mistake or ill-chosen action is your own damn fault, that it's proof positive that you are flawed and unworthy. And shame convinces you that you do not deserve the care of your people or forgiveness because of your unworthiness. Shame votes you off the island. As moral emotions go, shame is a wasteland. It's a rundown shack of an emotion. And shame can break our spirit and lead to psychological defenses that serve only to add more shame and isolate us further. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist, used to tell his patients, shame is a soul-eating emotion. When shame takes over, our thoughts condemn us. The body language of shame is to cast our eyes down and turn away from others. We often cover our eyes with one hand as if to say, I'm so unworthy and I know it. I can't even look you in the eye. Guilt, by contrast, is a more affable fellow who seems to take it in stride that we all make mistakes, even really big ones, and we still remain worthy and deserving of care. Guilt tells us that our behavior is out of line and that we need to step up and do something about that. But it doesn't slam our worthiness or question our value to others. Guilt tosses out the bathwater, but it keeps the baby safe. In this sense, guilt is a valuable emotion. I'm just getting over a cold, sorry. It's a corrective emotion. It's a functional GPS, one that urges our behavior back into alignment with our own values and the values of our community. Of course, it hurts. Guilt hurts. Owning up to our mistakes hurts. But it's kind of a 2 chili pepper level of discomfort, as opposed to shame's 5 chili pepper sting. The difference between these two emotions can be traced back to our early development. Our moral emotions begin to emerge at about age 1.5 years in response to corrective feedback from our environment. Hitting your cousin is bad, or good boys don't lie. We need this to learn to be part of a family and a community, and over time we internalize the messages. They take root in us, they become ours, and they guide our moral choices. So what happens if the feedback we get is inaccurate or exaggerated, or it's delivered in a harsh way? Does this throw our moral system out of whack? Well, yeah. Because we internalize and believe inaccurate feedback also, not knowing it for what it is. And hard-edged words can bore holes in our hearts that can last a lifetime. Shame-prone people have been subjected to these kind of words over and over and over. So we must be diligent and distinguish the value of a person from the worthiness of their actions in our words. When shame arises, if it arises, when it arises, we can use mindfulness actually to help us get through those moments. We can use the gentle awareness of mindfulness to turn and face squarely the pain of shame. We can feel our way into our bodies where shame shows up, perhaps as a pit in the stomach or a heaviness in the heart. And then we breathe deep breaths. We stay aware that shame plays dirty. It exaggerates and condemns and calls us names. And we can use our mindfulness wisdom. Don't believe everything you think. To remember that our self-judgments are just thoughts, so we don't have to take them so seriously. That alone will help take the sting out of shame. And then we can support ourselves to stay in connection with our people. Hold the gaze. Remember how the body language of shame is eyes cast downward and a separation. We can hold our eye contact and continue to have conversation even when we've made a mistake. And that will weaken the hold of shame. And then we can lean in and connect. Shame only thrives in silence. So we resist silence, and we remember the words of the poet Elizabeth Austen. What fiasco did our obedience, our silence, ever fend off? Shed your disguises and open your mouth. Lean in close and tell your stories and receive the soothing and the comfort of your trusted people. And then figure out what you must do. When I was in elementary school, I hung around with some oddball kids who were prone to lunchroom games that posed impossible choices for each other. One conflict I remember was, what would you rather do? Slide down a 30-foot razor or suck snot from a dead man's nose? We were kids, okay? Death or disgust? Pick your poison. In adult life, we humans also face impossible choices. situations where we must choose an action that we despise in order to survive or keep a job or save a marriage. And in these moments when our moral values are pitted one against the other, we will probably have to compromise some aspect of our ethics. And then find a way to live with the inevitable firestorm of guilt that creates. Ilsa faced just such a situation when she got off the train at Majdanek. She was in danger and she wanted to live. Had she spoken in defense of those two young girls, it's very possible that she too would have been ordered to her death. So she walked the girls to the ovens. And of course she felt good. Guilty. She felt guilty. Anyone would. What Ilsa failed to do is offer herself compassion. Trapped, trying to repay a moral debt she didn't really owe, she inhabited a half-lived life. She was unable to acknowledge that she had faced an impossible choice, one imposed on her, and she had done her best. A part of maturity involves accepting the messy truth that as good people, we can't always act good. As good people, we can't always do what others ask of us. And as good people, we can't always help. Life is just not that tidy. So what we can do is do our best to align our actions with our morals, hold our governments accountable, and then cultivate self-compassion as we face our fates. We breathe out, we touch in, and we let go, so that we can inhabit our untidy lives entirely. Thank you.